New York is a city of light, noise, and endless hustle and bustle. Here, skyscrapers pierce the sky, streets pulsate with life, and the subway never sleeps. But beneath this shiny surface, something else lurks. Beneath the glass and concrete, another New York lives, the one the guidebooks don't tell you about. A city of shadows, disappearances, underground rooms, vanishing trains, and people who shouldn't exist. These aren't legends. These are documented facts, official records, and confessions from those who dared to tell. And today, we'll explore 15 such stories, strange, disturbing, and still unexplained. New York hides more than it seems. And today, you'll see for yourself. The secret room at New York University Library. Hidden behind its austere neo-Gothic facade, the New York University Library seems secure and intelligible. Every day, hundreds of students pass through its halls, flipping through books, clicking away on laptops, staring at their screens, never looking up. They think everything in this building is organized rationally, the floors, the catalogs, the schedules. But in 2004, a random hammer blow punched a hole in this certainty. Literally. It all started with a routine renovation. University staff granted permission to restore the lower level of Bobst Library, a concrete basement where old archives and obsolete volumes were stored. Contractors began work, knocking out a section of the wall to install a ventilation duct. Suddenly, beneath the concrete and brick, they discovered a cavity. This wasn't just a technical gap. Behind the destroyed section of wall, a room opened up, cramped, almost square, windowless, with a single narrow door that was sealed from the inside. There was no record of this room's existence in the building's plans. The room had no ventilation, no power supply, and according to all official documents, it didn't exist at all. What was discovered inside immediately halted all work. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if the room hadn't been opened in decades. A wooden chair stood in the center, firmly bolted to the floor with 4 rusty bolts. Next to it sat a narrow table with an empty drawer. The walls were covered in scratches, lines, and symbols, as if someone had desperately scratched them out with their fingernails or some other sharp object. At first, they were thought to be just random marks, but one of the architects who examined the room recognized some of the drawings as a repeating pattern, similar to a cryptographic cipher from the Second World War. In the right corner of the room stood a wooden bookcase filled with books. There weren't many of them, less than 2 dozen. They were tightly bound with no titles on the spines or library records. Most of them were written in Latin, a few in Hebrew, and an old French dialect. Particular attention was drawn to a book with a blackened leather cover on which was burned a symbol resembling a closed human palm with a missing thumb. There was no text inside, only images, anatomy diagrams, geometric shapes, intersecting circles, and strange images of a man with hollows where his face should be. On the last page, a single handwritten inscription in English read, "He looked in the mirror and forgot his name." Since the room was opened, the building has been acting strangely. 3 workers involved in dismantling the wall were admitted to intensive care a few days later with symptoms of severe facial paralysis. None of them had any underlying medical conditions, had taken any toxic substances, and doctors were unable to determine the exact cause. One of them later claimed to have seen the room again in a dream. Only now it was filled with dozens of people sitting on identical chairs with numbers scratched into their foreheads. In the weeks following the incident, students began complaining more frequently of headaches and nausea, and one classroom even experienced a brief power outage that was out of sync with the library's scheduled power outages. Several people claimed to have seen a light coming from beneath the floor during the night. The university hastily organized a re-examination of the underground level, but official comments were limited to unforeseen engineering difficulties. When the story began to leak to the student press, the university closed access to the repair documentation and some staff were transferred to other facilities. According to a former student who interned in the archival service, the room was sealed again, this time behind an additional layer of concrete, and a new protocol, separate from the university's general database, was implemented in the basement's electronic access system. The basement itself became completely closed to students and faculty. The official version remains unchanged, a construction error, minor damage, or an overreaction by the contractor. But many at NYU and beyond are convinced the room was intentional. Someone built it in the heart of an academic building with no access, no windows, no purpose other than to hide something from the world. Not a single camera captured the moment the wall was opened. The only surviving image is a blurry photo taken on a phone by one of the workers before he began having epileptic seizures. You can see that very chair on it, and in front of it, on the floor, there's something written in red. It's hard to make out exactly, but if you zoom in, some claim it says unread. The house on Riverside Drive where no one could sleep. On Riverside Drive, on the Upper West Side, stands a modest brick house, unremarkable from the outside. Tucked between two high-rise residential buildings, it's easily lost amid Manhattan's opulent architecture. 3 stories, 4 apartments, and a narrow entryway with a peeling door. The building, at first glance, appears old, but quite ordinary. However, over the past 6 years, it has seen more tenants than any other building in the neighborhood. And it wasn't because of the rent, noisy neighbors, or mold on the ceiling. People left because they couldn't sleep. Not figuratively, not because of insomnia or anxiety. It was about the inability to sleep at all, as if something were happening within the walls of this building that prevented the brain from shutting down. Almost all the tenants moved out within 3 days of moving in. Those who tried to stay longer ended up in emergency rooms, shaking, confused, and experiencing bouts of paranoia. Some claimed to feel their thoughts becoming alien, as if someone or something was watching them from inside their heads. In 2019, a Columbia University student couple, Lindsay and Jason, rented a second-floor apartment. They moved in that evening and realized on their first night that something was wrong. They told friends that as soon as they tried to go to bed, a constant internal noise seemed to start in their heads. Not a sound, not a voice, but something like flickering thoughts that weren't there. Words, phrases, images of other people's memories, bursting out like from a broken radio. Meanwhile, the house was completely silent. They tried sleeping on the floor, in the bathroom, on the landing, to no avail. Sleeping pills didn't work. Even the diazepam Lindsay had prescribed didn't provide the slightest relaxation. On the 3rd night, Jason tried to leave for the hotel, but on the way there, he developed tachycardia and a panic attack. He was taken to the hospital. Lindsay, left alone, claimed to have heard someone pacing in the kitchen downstairs, though the door was locked and no one had entered. That morning, she called a taxi and never returned. The building's owner declined to comment on the situation. He said he didn't have to explain why someone wasn't getting enough sleep. But the documents reveal that almost every rental lasted between 2 and 4 days, and since 2020, the lease agreements have included a strange clause: the need to confirm the tenant's psycho-emotional stability for long-term stays. In 2021, a team of neuroscientists from Cornell attempted to examine the building. One of the scientists, Dr. Hugo Shapiro, installed devices in the bedroom of a 3rd-floor apartment. Over the course of 2 hours, an unusual increase in alpha-band brain activity was recorded in all 3 participants, even though none of them were in sleep. One of them later claimed that he, for some reason, recalled childhood memories of an unknown woman. Measurements recorded short but regular pulsating electromagnetic bursts within a single frequency, 17 and 6 Hz. No household or urban devices were operating in this range at the time. When the participants left the building, brain activity returned to normal. One of the most disturbing episodes occurred in the winter of 2022. A young woman who had checked in online was found unconscious and severely dehydrated in Riverside Park 4 days later. Doctors determined she hadn't slept the entire time. There was an audio recording on her phone made on the second night. In the recording, she can be heard crying and repeating the phrase, "They're in my head, and they have no eyes." It later emerged that the site of the current house housed a private hospital in the 19th century, where neuropsychiatric experiments were conducted on Civil War veterans. The building burned down under mysterious circumstances in 1889, and the archives were destroyed. But on old city maps, you can find the name of a psychiatric clinic. Today, the building is still for rent. Advertisements disappear as quickly as the tenants. And although from the outside it looks like part of the ordinary urban landscape, flat, calm, unremarkable, those who once entered it and tried to sleep no longer call it simply home. Underground tunnels under Central Park. Central Park is the green heart of Manhattan, stretching like a broad ribbon among glass and concrete. Thousands of people walk its paths every day, sit on benches, and listen to street musicians, unaware that beneath their feet lies not just a system of utility lines, but something much older, much deeper, and perhaps completely alien to our world. Officially, the park's underground structures consist only of utility corridors, old cable tunnels, a few ventilation shafts, and a closed drainage system. But beginning in the late 19th century, strange documents began surfacing in the city's archives, diagrams showing passages and chambers that don't appear in modern drawings. Some end in dead ends, others disappear underground toward the east side, where residential buildings are supposed to be located. In one such drawing from 1891, the architect's handwriting is written at the bottom, "Block up entrance. Beyond is the old." One of the most famous stories occurred in 1932 when a boy named Benjamin Stack disappeared in the park during an afternoon walk. Witnesses claimed he was playing near a boulder near what is now Bethesda Terrace. His mother turned around for a second, and the boy was gone. Police searched the area, searched underground utilities, and called in divers to inspect the pond. No trace of him. 2 months later, a worker laying telephone cable in the 72nd Street area found a child's shoe in an underground hole, exactly the same as Benjamin's mother had described. The problem was, the hole was located more than 20 meters below ground, in a place where there had never been any mines or tunnels. Since then, rumors of underground tunnels have multiplied. They say there's a metal door in the southern part of the park, closer to the Plaza Hotel, that leads to nowhere. Maintenance crews sometimes open it, but no one has ever seen anyone enter or exit it. There's no sign at the entrance. Inside, an old staircase leads downward and disappears into the darkness. A former Parks Department employee who wished to remain anonymous said he was tasked with repairing a hole in the asphalt near the Shakespeare Gardens in the 1990s. During their inspection, they came across stonework, perfectly smooth, seamless, and clearly not modern. Beneath it ran a narrow, arched passageway. According to instructions, they were supposed to fill it all with concrete. But, according to him, after the work was completed, he was ordered to destroy the photographs and never bring up the matter again. On Digger and Stalker forums, you can find reports from those who have attempted to independently explore the underground spaces beneath Central Park. Some claim to have stumbled upon sealed doors bearing an emblem reminiscent of the old Masonic symbol. One described a circular chamber beneath an earthen dome, the walls covered in soot and a stone pedestal with a recess in the center, as if for an altar. Others described hearing a metallic humming sound emanating from the depths, as if ancient mechanisms had been activated upon approach. In 2017, a group of tourists entered the park at night through one of the service entrances, which was open during cleaning. Among them was a photographer fascinated by urban architecture. He claims that near the Ramble, they discovered a wooden door in the ground, partially covered with sheets. It was unlocked. After descending a few meters, they found themselves in a narrow tunnel with stone walls where the temperature dropped sharply. Dark symbols carved into the stone covered the walls. A photo later posted on Reddit shows a spiral-shaped symbol reminiscent of ancient Celtic designs. Tourists claim that after a few minutes the tunnel began to sound, not with words, but with a kind of vibrational hum. Panic gripped them and they climbed out. The door slammed behind them. When journalists from a local publication tried to verify this story, they couldn't find the entrance. A flower bed now occupies the site. City officials officially deny the existence of hidden tunnels beneath Central Park other than maintenance ones. However, in 2021, during an infrastructure hearing, a strange line in a report surfaced. Maintenance of sealed lots, 1922, Central Subterranean Sector, a term not found in publicly available documents. The park continues to live its normal daily life, with laughter, jogging, and boats on the pond. But at night, especially in the quiet hours between 2 and 4, old-timers say the ground trembles slightly in certain spots, and if you press your ear to the stone balustrade by the pond, you can hear something that doesn't sound like water or wind. It's more like movement, very slow and very distant. A homeless double in the subway. The New York City subway is a living organism. It hums, breathes, moves, and hides beneath thousands of feet. Millions of passengers glide through its tunnels every day, and no one makes eye contact with a stranger. It's easy to get lost here and easy to disappear. But beginning in 2012, stories began surfacing in various parts of the city about a man who couldn't be explained, or more accurately, about people who looked exactly like people who had already died. The first recorded incident occurred at the 14th Street station. A nurse named Carol was heading home after a night shift. She saw a homeless man on the platform, bearded, hooded, dirty jacket, and swaying gait. Nothing unusual. But the moment he turned his head, Carol froze. It was the face of her former patient, the man who had died in her ward of a heart attack 3 days ago. He lay in her arms. She had seen his body carried away, and yet she recognized him exactly, unmistakably. She came closer. The man, as if sensing it, glanced at her, bowed his head slightly, and stepped onto the next train. Carol followed him, but according to her, he was no longer there at the next station. CCTV cameras provided at the MTA's request did not record a single person resembling the person described. And on the platform where he allegedly boarded, there was only one other passenger at the time, Carol herself. A week later, a conductor on the D-Line overnight express told a similar story. He reported a man in a gray coat sitting alone at the end of the train. When the train arrived at its final destination, the man was still sitting there. Only his face seemed to have been replaced by a shadow. The worker went to wake him, but as he put it, nobody was there. The next night, he saw him again, on the same bench. He quit a month later, refusing to explain the reasons. Over time, descriptions began to emerge that matched down to the smallest detail. The same silhouette, the same eyes, the same gaze. Tired, empty, as if cut off from the world. Only one thing changed: the face. Each time it matched the appearance of a person who had recently died in the area. Remarkably, almost all of the descriptions of these encounters occurred 2 or 3 days after death, when news sites published photos of the deceased. In one case, a woman identified the figure of her deceased son, a former veteran. She saw him at the turnstile at 34th Street, Penn Station. He was standing, as usual, with his right hand on his hip. He had a pelvic injury. But when she called out to him, he didn't turn around. He simply stepped into the crowd and disappeared. Some theories attribute it all to coincidences and psychological breakdowns, stress, grief, obsessive images. However, in several cases, cameras did indeed capture a figure entering the train car, but never exiting. It didn't cross the turnstile, didn't cross the platform, didn't take the stairs. It simply disappeared between stations. In 2018, paranormal researcher Professor Arthur Lowell of the College of Paranormal Hunters attempted to systematize the data. He collected 42 testimonies from different years, in different areas, and from people with no connections to each other. Almost all descriptions began with one detail: a strong smell of dust and copper, as if an old electrical panel or archive box had been opened nearby. It was this smell that most witnesses detected before spotting the figure. But there was something else. Several people, all homeless, claimed to know the man with strange faces. They called him the Crosser, or the one who hasn't chosen a side. He always appeared, they said, at the third station from where someone died. Always by the wall, always alone, and always waiting. In 2022, a teenager filmed a short video on his phone at J Street Station. He focused on a strange man in a shabby jacket, sitting with his back to him. At one point, the man turns his head toward the camera, and the image distorts, as if an electronic glitch were sweeping across the frame. His face is indistinguishable, just a general blur and a dim light in the eyes. A moment later, the figure disappears. No sudden movement, no editing, just disappears. The video ended up on TikTok, racked up millions of views, and was deleted a day later without explanation. All reposts also disappeared. The MTA always responds to official inquiries with the same answer. No confirmed anomalies have been registered in the system. But there's an unwritten rule among employees. If you see someone who looks too familiar, don't approach them. Don't call them. Don't look them in the face. Because, as one veteran driver said at a depot veterans meeting, some trains only go one way, and not everyone gets on them alive. Windowless Tower number 33 in the financial district. At the intersection of Thomas and Church Streets, amid the bustling financial district of Manhattan, a strange building rises. It's hard to miss. 170 meters of gray concrete. No windows, no signs, no flags, no logos. Just smooth concrete walls, as if carved from a monolith. The building is known as 33 Thomas Street, but those interested in urban anomalies have long since acquired another name: the Tower That Doesn't Look. Officially, it's a telecommunications hub built in 1974 for Western Union and later transferred to another company. It's nuclear resistant, has its own independent water supply, diesel generators, blackout zones, and reinforced doors. The tower is indeed operational, equipment is delivered, and occasionally employees in gray uniforms enter. But no one has ever seen anyone peeking out from inside. In 2016, an investigation by The Intercept, based on Edward Snowden's leaks, revealed that the building may be used as a key surveillance site for the U.S. National Security Agency. Inside is a massive data center connected to key undersea and urban communications cables. But what's truly frightening isn't the intelligence services. It's the stories of those who claim the building is under surveillance. That in itself. Several workers in neighboring buildings reported experiencing severe discomfort when near the tower. Some experienced anxiety attacks, while others experienced headaches that only occurred when spending long periods of time outdoors near its eastern wall. A security guard at a nearby apartment complex reported that his dog refuses to come within 20 meters of the building's base. It begins howling, digs in its paws, and turns away. At night, radio reception is often disrupted above the tower. Regular radio transmissions are interrupted by a dull noise and sometimes by sharp pulses resembling coded signals. One radio amateur claims to have decoded the fragment and obtained a sequence of numbers that matches the GPS coordinates of an abandoned lighthouse that has stood in the Atlantic without maintenance since 1972. In 2020, a blogger known by the pseudonym Urban Loops attempted to film a video on the roofs of nearby buildings to peer inside through the ventilation grills. In his latest video, he claims the building is illuminated from within, but not uniformly like regular lamps, but with a pulsating glow emanating from the center upward. A drone camera flying closer to the 5th level detected a strange magnetic distortion. The device shut down and the drone crashed. When he tried to climb the service ladder to the roof of a neighboring building, the door was already locked, even though it had been open during the day. The blogger disappeared 3 days later. His YouTube channel was deleted, and the website domain was purchased and redirected to the website of a company believed to be its owner. On a radio signal repeater forum, one member reported working as a contractor on the building for 3 years. He said the building has at least 11 floors, not 7, as stated in the documentation. Some levels, however, aren't marked in the elevator system. Access is only possible with a physical key and palm print authentication. He also mentioned that one of the lower levels is marked off limits to non-humans, which sparked a flurry of discussion. The user later deleted their account and hasn't been seen since. On city maps available through the public archive, the building is designated as building number 3305. However, in the Bureau of Construction's archives from the 1970s, it bore a different name, Project XBT, and was labeled as a building without reflective surfaces. This is a term more commonly used in aerospace engineering than architecture. Those who live nearby have grown accustomed to giving the building a wide berth. It doesn't directly evoke fear, but it's excluded from the city. It doesn't live by its laws. It has no windows because it doesn't need to see. It listens. It waits. And perhaps at some point, it will speak. Ghost Station. Deep beneath the streets of Lower Manhattan, tucked away in a curved ancient tunnel, lies one of the most beautiful and least known spots on the New York City subway, the abandoned City Hall station. Its curved platform, mosaic arches, stained glass windows, and bronze chandeliers recall the hall of an ancient European train station, but it hasn't served passengers for over 70 years. The station officially closed in 1945 due to incompatibility with new trains and low throughput. But even decades later, rumors persist, because some claim the station is still alive. Just not for everyone. Access is impossible from the street. All entrances are welded shut, bricked up, and heavily guarded. However, Line 6 trains make a U-turn through this underground hall. And if you stay on the train after the last stop, you might, with a little luck, catch a glimpse of this station, hidden behind curved walls, with a glint of light on the mosaic. But sometimes, very rarely, the train stops. The first such incident was recorded in 1978. A student named Arnie Glass was riding the 6 line at night, fell asleep, and woke up on an empty platform. The lights were dim, but working. The doors opened, but no one entered. A man in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat stood on the platform. He raised his head, and Arnie saw that his face seemed obscured. Not covered, but erased. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, the figure was gone. The train began moving again. His story seemed preposterous until 1983, when a Line 6 train driver reported that the signal system showed a dummy landing at City Hall Station. The train braked, and according to him, the doors opened automatically, despite the station having no functioning automatic control systems. No one boarded. However, cameras inside the car later recorded a change in lighting at the moment of boarding, as if someone had blocked the light source. In 1991, a group of diggers attempted to enter the station through an old maintenance tunnel. Only one of them, a man named Sam Winters, subsequently returned. The other 2 disappeared. Sam was found a day later in the tunnel, with deep scratches on his arms and face and in a state of severe nervous breakdown. He didn't speak, only repeating the phrase, "They don't walk on the rails. They walk on the walls." The MTA officially prohibits any attempt to enter the station area. Even during tours, employees are accompanied by security guards, and routes are strictly regulated. However, drivers periodically report abnormal stops, flashing lights, movement behind the glass, and strange sensor readings, as if the train had entered an area where something was already present. These reports are not made public, but are recorded in internal systems. In 2017, a journalist from an independent publication attempted to take a photo report from a spread on Line 6. She remained on the train, and as it slowed, she snapped a series of shots from the window. In one of them, in the center of the platform, a human figure is clearly visible. However, the lens mirror is distorted, as if the space itself were rippling in that spot. A technical analysis of the photograph confirmed that a digital glitch had occurred in the center of the frame, for no apparent reason. This area was found to be saturated with information noise, even though the image was taken with a professional camera. Some believe City Hall Station isn't just a remnant of the past, but a crossing point, a node where layers of time and space temporarily collide. And when a train enters this curve, especially at night, during a quiet hour, it feels as if it's touching something that shouldn't be on the schedule. One driver who resigned in 2020 said something before leaving that his colleagues remembered. "Nobody gets on at this station because those who get on don't get off." Voices in the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. The Brooklyn Battery is one of New York City's oldest and most important tunnels, running under the Hudson River and connecting Manhattan with Brooklyn. Thousands of cars pass through its narrow, confined space every day, oblivious to the fact that they are nearly 100 feet below the surface. But it is there, in the heart of the city's underground artery, that something begins to emerge that defies explanation. For over 2 decades, drivers, police officers, maintenance workers, and ordinary passengers have been reporting the same thing. Voices. These aren't just ordinary noises, not the screeching of tires, not the whine of ventilation, not the static from radio transmitters. These are distinct human words, sounding somewhere nearby, as if someone is standing behind a concrete wall, whispering as if from within. They can be heard through closed windows, with the engine running, sometimes even over the music in headphones. Sometimes these words are in English. Sometimes they're in an incomprehensible language, made up of fragments, wheezing, numbers, as if a broadcast had been interrupted. One of the earliest documented cases occurred in 1999. A taxi driver named Raul Fernandez reported that around 3 in the morning, while driving through a tunnel, he heard someone in his car ask him not to slow down. He instinctively looked back. The passenger was gone. He was driving alone. The radio was off. The voice was male, low and distinct. A second later, his brakes failed, and he crashed into a barrier on the ramp. He survived. Auto mechanics later determined that the brake fluid was normal and the pedal was not sticking. No mechanical cause for the accident was found. In 2007, maintenance workers performing a routine inspection of cables in a side corridor of the tunnel recorded echo-like bursts of sound that were not consistent with equipment operation. One of them recorded audio on a voice recorder. The words "we're still down there" can be heard. The voice is muffled, as if heard through a thick layer of water or concrete. Technical analysis revealed that the voice was not a reflection, a signal re-reflection, or an electrical side effect. The source has not been identified. The peculiarity of voices is that they don't record reliably. Numerous attempts to capture the sounds on a voice recorder, camera, or phone usually failed. Either nothing played or the file was damaged. But the live experience is always the same. The feeling that someone is speaking nearby, even though no one is nearby. Some drivers reported hearing a child's cry, seemingly coming from the ventilation shafts. Others heard a female voice repeating their name. There were cases where passengers began to panic in the middle of the tunnel, demanding that the vehicle be turned around immediately and driven away. One of them, an ambulance driver, wrote in his report, "I didn't know who was telling me stop, but I heard it as if I was sitting right next to him." In 2015, work was being carried out to reconstruct the tunnel's sound system. One of the engineers, who came from Boston, reported detecting a resonance that couldn't be explained by the tunnel's architectural form. He said the vibration frequency was out of sync with the tunnel's length and that he felt something moving within the walls. He refused to continue the work, citing unintended acoustic distortions with potential psychological impact. Police reports document complaints of hallucinations, anxiety, and severe disorientation among drivers, especially at night. Some claim to suddenly hear the voice of a deceased relative uttering a short phrase related to their shared past. All incidents occurred in the tunnel and never anywhere else. Anomaly researchers attribute the phenomenon to the geometry of the space beneath the Hudson River. It's believed that the internal tunnel creates a resonant zone where certain frequencies can trigger distorted sound remnants, as if the space's memory were replaying past tragedies. Since the 1940s, several dozen people have died in the tunnel, in accidents, fires, and the collapse of temporary structures. According to one theory, the aural imprints of these deaths continue to linger. The strangest thing about this story is how the city is reacting to it. Officially, nothing. All archived records are labeled unconfirmed subjective observations. But according to unofficial information, a few years ago, an autonomous active noise cancellation system was installed under the tunnel. But no one knows who's responsible for it. It's not shown on the drawings. And when its devices are activated, the voices get louder, as if they're angry. Roosevelt Hospital and the disappearance of patients. On the west side of Manhattan, between West End Avenue and Riverside Drive, stood a building that had long been a part of the city's topography. Roosevelt Hospital, founded in the 19th century and operating for over a century. Amidst the brick building's echoing corridors, the hum of coils, IVs, and the voices of doctors in white coats, life went on. Daily, mundane, technical. Until one day. Until a night that neither newspapers nor city services chose to publicize. It happened in the winter of 1957, February 18th. Snow had been falling since early morning, the temperature had dropped to -15, and the city slowed to a halt. In the hospital's neurology department, on the 3rd floor of the South Wing, 5 patients were sharing a room, all men, all admitted with various diagnoses, from Parkinson's disease to post-traumatic stress disorder. None of them were considered dangerous. 2 were already being prepared for discharge. The night nurse, as per protocol, entered the ward at 3:15, time for a routine checkup. The door was locked, as required, from the inside. Opening it, she found an empty room. Empty, literally. The beds remained unmade, the monitors were running, personal belongings lay on the nightstands. Not a sound, not a trace. All 5 had vanished, simultaneously. A doctor was called and examined the room. No signs of violence, forced entry, or commotion. All exits were locked, and security claimed no one had left the building. An internal investigation was launched. They checked the ventilation systems, attics, and underground levels. They reviewed the visitor log and telephone records. Nothing. The only odd thing is that at the moment of the supposed disappearance, a brief but sharp drop in pressure in the oxygen system was recorded in the ward, as if something had sucked the air out of the room. But this is physically impossible. The system is autonomous, closed, and not connected to any external channels. Security claimed the doors remained locked. There were no CCTV cameras in the building at the time. They weren't installed until the 1960s. The duty officer's report mentioned a detail later deleted from the official version. A few minutes before the incident, a ripple appeared on the wall opposite the room, as if the air there was trembling, as if over a fire. One orderly compared it to the wave from the image decay on an old television. After a day of searching, the hospital closed the ward, sealed all records, and moved patients from adjacent rooms. The families of the missing received letters about the unforeseen move and the need for additional time to clarify the circumstances. But none of them ever learned what happened. In 1975, nearly 20 years later, during the demolition of one of the hospital's buildings, construction workers discovered an old steel door in the basement, walled up from the inside. Beyond it lay a narrow corridor leading to a spiral staircase that ended in a windowless chamber with an iron table and a lamp. On the wall is a graffiti. This was the last attempt. They left on their own terms. Below are 5 names, partially faded. All match those of the missing patients. Officials dismissed the discovery as remnants of a temporary shelter from World War II. The door was welded shut, the materials were removed, and the matter was closed. But among Roosevelt veterans, especially those who worked there that winter, the legend remained. They said that the building's ventilation system fell silent that night and that the silence became so thick it seemed to absorb the sound of footsteps. Some still insist it wasn't a mistake, not a crime, not an escape. It was a displacement to a place where there are no names, only remnants. Today, the administrative center stands on the site of the South Wing. It's a typical office building, but its third floor is unused. On the plan, it's designated as a spare technical level. And by the door leading to the former elevator, you can still make out a faded number, 3B, the Chamber of the Disappeared. Abandoned elevator on 104th Street. At the intersection of 104th Street and Amsterdam Avenue stands an old dark brick apartment building. It doesn't stand out among other buildings on the Upper West Side, except that no one has lived there for more than a few months since the late 1980s. At first, it was blamed on dilapidation, then on utility problems. But those who left the building almost always mentioned the same thing: the elevator. The internal elevator, designated Elevator B, appears on the 1937 drawings, but is no longer included in any subsequent plans. However, the cabin is located at the end of the South Corridor, near the fire exit, and occasionally operates. The lighting inside is dim, the buttons are worn, and the display is out. But the door opens on its own, sometimes at night, sometimes without being called. And every time someone dared to enter, something strange happened. One of the first documented cases occurred in 1992. A journalist from a local publication filming a story about dilapidated housing entered the elevator to take a photo. A neighbor claims he pressed the button and disappeared. He returned only 7 hours later, pale and with shaking hands. He couldn't explain where he was. His watch was stopped at 2:13, even though the photo was taken around noon. In the photograph taken a second before he entered, there's the shadow of a second figure next to him, though he was alone. In 2006, a family of 3 moved into the building after a major renovation. The mother, taking her son to the 8th floor, decided to use the elevator while her husband parked the car. The doors closed. Her husband arrived 10 minutes later, and the elevator was on the ground floor. But no one was inside. No child. No mother. The police found no security footage. The elevator, according to records, was turned off. But the neighbor downstairs claimed to have heard voices coming from the shaft that night. Childish, distorted, as if through water. In 2015, a young woman named Ashley Mason attempted to explore the elevator herself. She lived on the 3rd floor and claimed the elevator opened by itself every day at 3:17 a.m. She spent a week observing, recording sound, and taking photographs. One night, she entered with a camera. The last thing she recorded was a reflection in the mirror behind her, where, besides her, stood another figure, tall and with her head bowed. The camera fell. Ashley returned only in the early morning, shoeless, with her shirt inside out. She was found sitting in the basement, repeating only one thing: "He knows the floor, but he doesn't know where we are now." Engineers who inspected the elevator were unable to find the mechanisms that kept it running. The cable had long since been cut. There was no power. Yet the doors opened, the cabin rose and fell, and occasionally handprints appeared on the elevator's interior walls, thin, childlike, stretched upward, as if trying to escape. Since 2018, the elevator entrance has been welded shut with a metal shield. But locals swear by it. At night, especially on windy November days, if you stand by the door, you can hear movement behind the steel paneling, as if someone is ascending again, or descending. Several people have reported experiencing bouts of déjà vu after this, as if they've already lived this moment, stood by this door, only in another life. One of the former residents, a retired engineer, recounted a legend he'd once heard from an old elevator operator. That in 1942, an experiment was conducted in this building with isolated vertical movement, a device that doesn't transport people between floors, but rather unfolds the space inside. And the elevator may no longer belong to the house. It belongs to something between floors, between dates, between lives. Bridge of the Damned in Queens. In Queens, between residential neighborhoods and an industrial area, a modest, unremarkable railroad bridge spans. It's not marked on tourist maps, doesn't appear in TV series, and isn't considered a landmark. It's just a bridge. Rusty, low, with a narrow road running underneath. And yet, the locals call it by one name, the Bridge of the Damned. The crossing in question is at the intersection of Booth Avenue and 164th Street, near Jamaica Yard. 9 loss-of-control-related deaths have occurred at this location over the past 30 years. Almost all of the accidents occurred without apparent cause, dry weather, daylight, and vehicles in good condition. According to official reports, drivers suddenly lost their bearings, unexpectedly swerved into oncoming traffic, or crashed into bridge supports at low speed. Something doesn't add up. In 2003, a city maintenance technician, Thomas Kendrick, was driving under the bridge in his service car. He later reported that as he passed, he saw a man in the shadows, standing close to the wall. He thought it was a homeless person, but when he looked back in the mirror to check, there was no one there, just a black stain on the wall, indelible. He tried to take a photo of it, but the image came out blurry. 2 days later, he was hospitalized with migraines and auditory hallucinations. He heard a voice repeating the same phrase, "Stop before you get to the bottom." Since 2010, anomalies in the bridge's equipment have been recorded. Car navigation systems shut down, and electronic clocks slow down or stop. Several drivers reported that when passing under the bridge, a sudden intense cold would set in, and the car's glass would fog up, even in summer. Some reported seeing a word written on the wall, dark like charcoal or blood. Each person saw a different word. Come back, not here, not yet. In 2017, a teenager filming a TikTok video attempted to walk under the bridge at night as part of an urban challenge. The recording, which was saved by Reddit users, features a rustling sound, followed by a female voice saying, "You're already there." After that, the camera falls. The boy was found in the bushes 6 hours later with a cut on the back of his head and a blank expression on his face. He had no memory of how he got there. 2 months later, his family moved away. Old-timers in the area say this was once a slave cemetery. Other rumors suggest that the entrance to an old water treatment mine, where workers died in 1924, was located under the bridge. However, the city archives contain no evidence that this point was deliberately deleted from the city's historical plan. Neither engineers nor local historians can find official drawings of the ground beneath the bridge. The land in this area is unmapped. At one point, the bridge was slated for demolition, but something always got in the way. An accident the day before, a sudden equipment failure, a contractor's refusal. In 2021, city engineer Elijah Cohen resigned after spending the night on the site, guarding construction materials. He claimed someone had been knocking on the walls outside for 2 hours, even though there was a concrete support outside. In the morning, he discovered a symbol on the van door that resembled an ancient spiral, elongated, jagged, as if scratched with fingernails. Today, locals avoid this crossing. Drivers turn around early, preferring to take a detour. Google Maps often skips this spot when plotting routes, as if by default. And only occasionally, accidentally, or out of ignorance, does someone drive under the bridge. And if you listen closely, right in the middle, you can detect a strange transition of silence, as if the sound turns off for a moment. The world becomes muffled, and it seems as if someone is watching. From within the concrete, from behind the support, from behind the glass. Music from underground in Greenpoint. Greenpoint is one of Brooklyn's oldest neighborhoods. It combines 19th century industrial buildings, dilapidated townhouses, and new residential complexes that have sprung up over the past 20 years. The neighborhood has long been home to artists, programmers, and young families strolling the streets with coffee and dogs. But there's a phenomenon in Greenpoint that neither urbanism, nor acoustics, nor even psychology can explain. It's music coming from underground. According to dozens of independent testimonies, on certain nights, most often the third Saturday of each month, between 2 and 4 a.m., residents of several neighborhoods hear a melody. It is not associated with clubs, cars, appliances, or church organs. It's old music, like a vinyl record with crackling sounds and barely perceptible instruments. Violin, piano, sometimes clarinet. No words, no radio signals. Just the melody, sad, drawn out, as if coming from the depths of time. Strange sounds were first reported back in 1994. Several elderly residents reported a night concert to the police, disturbing their sleep. The police were unable to find the source. Years later, recordings began appearing online, short audio files recorded on phones or voice recorders near open manholes and basement vents. The recordings contained the very same music. The specialists to whom they were given were unable to determine the style, the period, or the exact composition of the instruments. Some said it was 19th century. Others said the structure of the piece was too modern. Those who listened to the music described unusual effects. Some claimed it induced vivid dreams, even in those who typically don't remember their dreams. Others said the background music gave them a distinct feeling of being with someone from their past. Several people even said they felt a sense of familiarity, as if they had heard the melody in childhood, although there was no evidence to support this. In 2012, musicologist Colin Hendricks attempted to identify the source. He conducted a series of nighttime recording sessions with directional microphones on various streets. On that third Saturday at 3:11 a.m., his equipment detected a distinct musical sound from below and slightly offset to the northwest. But a minute later, the signal disappeared. And when he tried to play the file, it was empty. All the digital data was present, but there was no sound. The strangest thing is that the music never repeats itself. Those who recorded it in different months received different fragments, different keys, different lengths. But the mood is the same for everyone: melancholy, premonition, longing for something unknown. One day in 2018, a teenager named Elisha Moreno, hearing music near a basement vent on Green Street, attempted to climb down. He entered the basement of an abandoned building through an old maintenance hatch and descended below, into an old drainage shaft. He was found 12 hours later on the surface, barefoot, his eyes empty. He said nothing coherent except one thing: "They didn't want me to listen to the end." The police dismiss it as city noise, tired ears, and coincidences. But among Greenpoint residents, there are those who, every third Saturday, set a timer, go outside, stand still by the manhole, and wait. Because at that moment, the street changes. The air becomes thicker. The silence is ringing. And suddenly, from beneath the earth, from a crack in time, music sounds, as if someone is still playing. Down there, for someone, or for themselves, or for us, so that we don't forget that the city remembers. The temple under the City Hall building, New York City Hall, is one of the oldest administrative buildings in the city. Built in 1812, it has become a symbol of power, order, and political life in the metropolis. Flags fly above it, press conferences are held, and key decisions are made. But beneath its foundations, according to those who once found themselves too close to the technical zones, lies something that has nothing to do with democracy, law, or urban infrastructure. Beneath New York City Hall, there may be a temple, stone, prehistoric, and forgotten. The first oddity surfaced in 1997 when a group of engineers were installing a cooling line in the underground section of the complex. While drilling, the drill stopped abruptly, as if it had struck something much more solid than concrete. Excavations revealed dense stonework composed of processed slabs of unknown origin. Geologists determined that the material was neither local limestone nor Appalachian granite. It was black quartzite, typically found in South America or North Africa, and never before recorded in natural deposits in New York City. After the slab was discovered, the area was quickly sealed off. Engineers were issued a cease and desist order, and a week later, the project was reoriented, ostensibly due to tectonic instability. However, one of the contractors, who soon resigned, admitted in an interview with a local blog that beneath the section was an opening leading to a room he described as a hall with round walls and a pattern resembling a solar disk. In 2003, an independent researcher and archivist by training found a drawing from 1861 in a restricted section of the Municipal Archive. It showed a circular hall beneath the City Hall building with the caption, "Do not disturb." This drawing later disappeared from the archive. However, a card with an inventory number survived in the paper catalog. It is now also considered lost. According to urban legend, strange stones arranged in a spiral and extending into the ground were discovered in this area during colonial times. Local tribes avoided the area, considering it a dead funnel. French chroniclers wrote of a silent circle where the ground supposedly trembled even in windless weather. But as the city developed, the area was built over, and all memories were forgotten. Since 2010, City Hall staff began noticing strange electronic malfunctions in the basement areas. Locks would fail, lighting would change, and the climate control system would begin showing negative readings. One security report documented the spontaneous opening of a sealed hatch leading to an unused area. The guard who came down later claimed to have seen something like an altar built into the ground, but soon recanted his testimony. He was transferred to another department. In 2019, an anonymous source on Reddit posted an image they claimed was taken through a technical access hole in the floor beneath an old archive. The photo shows a semicircular chamber with columns and niches, each containing faceless statues. The image was quickly deleted and the account was suspended. Esoteric researchers suggest that beneath the City Hall building lies a prehistoric ritual structure used by ancient cultures long before the city's founding. Another theory is that it is one of the old world nodes hidden beneath modern megacities, where structures once stood that interacted with the Earth's fields or the geomagnetic grid. Today, no one is allowed in. The basements of the City Hall buildings are closed, all plans have been redesigned, and access to the technical entrances is controlled by armed guards. And yet, those who work in the building at night report that the floor sometimes hums in certain rooms, especially in the northern part. Not pipes, not ventilation. A low, measured ancient sound, as if somewhere below something resembling a mechanism were slowly and inexorably rotating. Or a cult. The disappearing F-line train. The New York City subway's F-line is one of the busiest in the system. It connects Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn, running underground for dozens of miles. Thousands of passengers use its cars daily, traveling from home to work, from school to the park, from life to life. But in the deepest tunnels between the 2nd Avenue and York Street stations, according to mounting evidence, a train appears that shouldn't be there. The first officially recorded deviation occurred in 2011. A traffic system operator noticed a non-standard train on the monitor, a train with a number long since removed from the database. It was traveling along Line F, but did not stop at any station. When they tried to track it manually, it disappeared. The operator assumed there was a malfunction. But 6 weeks later, the exact same train reappeared on the screen. The same thing happened. It passed through the section without stopping and disappeared before reaching the next node. The MTA attributed the incident to a signal reflection, but over the following years, dozens of passengers and metro workers began telling similar stories. The train would arrive at the station ahead of schedule, dirty with dim headlights. Sometimes it would be nearly empty, sometimes with figures inside, sitting too upright, as if frozen. One passenger boarded such a car on J Street, his phone suddenly going dead and his watch freezing. When he exited, he realized the train hadn't stopped at any station between Brooklyn and Manhattan. And the strangest thing, no one saw him again. platform cameras didn't record his boarding. In 2015, an MTA employee working at the East Broadway station reported that during her shift, the doors opened on their own, despite no announcement or incoming train. A chill wafted through the tunnel, and for a moment she heard a muffled voice say, "This is not your route." The next moment, the platform lights flickered, and the doors closed. There are reports that on certain nights, most often the second Tuesday of the month, a train appears near the maintenance loop near Church Avenue Station. It enters a siding not found on the new layouts and disappears. One driver, who wished to remain anonymous, claims to have boarded such a train, mistaking it for a reserve train. Everything in the cabin was off, no display, no radio. The train pulled away on its own. It moved almost silently, and the tunnel didn't end. After 40 minutes, it found itself at a dead end, with no rails, only concrete and a dead silence. A second later, everything went dark. He wasn't found until the next day, asleep on a bench at the station in another part of the city. Those who have observed the train from the outside say it always looks outdated, as if from another era. Some claim its number, 2057, belonged to a train decommissioned in 1974 after an unofficially recorded tragedy. Rumor has it that the train derailed on a test run, killing everyone on board. However, the MTA has not confirmed the existence of such an incident. Interestingly, when a ghost train appears, the information boards freeze or display absurd messages. Next stop unknown. You have already arrived. Crossing not possible. One station worker saved a photo of the board, which at 3:36 a.m. read, "Do not board." The board turned off a second later. Some passengers say the train isn't a machine, but a selection mechanism. It comes for those stuck in time, in choice, in themselves. Those who, for whatever reason, belong neither to the city nor to themselves. And once you've entered, you won't come out the same. There's a rule among the old depot workers. If you see a train arriving on an empty platform unannounced, with its windows darkened and a gentle hum like a sigh, stop. Don't move. Don't go there. Because it might be a train running in a circle, out of time. A train with no destination. Anomaly on 23rd Street. On 23rd Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues, stands an early 20th century apartment building. It looks like hundreds of other buildings in the area. A brick facade, a staircase with cast iron railings, an old elevator, creaking floors. Ordinary people live here. Young couples, writers, and old-timers in their 80s. Everything would be ordinary, if not for one thing. Every Friday night, exactly at 2:47, something happens in the house that some call a time shift, others call a fall from reality, and still others simply remain silent, not wanting to remember. The first to complain were the second-floor tenants. They claimed that on Friday nights, all clocks, both electronic and mechanical, stop working. Phones freeze, televisions turn off, even quartz watches freeze. The next day, everything works again, but the time elapsed since the freeze never matches the actual time. For some, it's 20 minutes. For others, an hour and a half. For one person, it's 3.5 years, as they claim. In 2018, a student named Mira rented an apartment here. She started keeping a diary of her observations because on the very first Friday, she noticed the light from the lamps flowing along the walls, as if the room were moving with her, as if in a dream. She wrote in her notebook, "The space has shifted a degree. I feel like the bed is no longer where it was." The security camera she installed in the kitchen recorded the chair rising slightly into the air and falling back down, with the recording time stopping at 2:47:06. And this was the case on all devices. The neighbor upstairs, an artist, claimed that on those nights the paintings on the walls changed slightly. The faces in the portraits turned, the background became different. He tried to photograph it, but the pictures showed ordinary images. He said, "Only when you're not looking are they alive, and on Friday nights, they know you're awake." The engineers were unable to find any electromagnetic causes for the phenomenon. No leaks, oscillations, or vibrations were detected. One of them, measuring the voltage in an electrical outlet, reported that at 2:47 a.m. the device showed minus 0.0 volts, a value impossible within the framework of physics. When he returned home, his watch was 8 minutes slow, and it was a mechanical watch with automatic winding. An interesting fact, in all the stories surrounding this anomaly, people hear no sound. A complete ringing silence descends, precise to the second. Even the dogs stop barking. Even the old pipes, which always groan in this house, fall silent. Some describe the feeling as the city ceased to exist. One tenant wrote, "I realized New York was gone. I was there, but it wasn't. For a moment, it was gone. And with it, everything." In 2021, one of the residents, an elderly veteran living on the 4th floor, came down to his neighbors after another quiet Friday and said, "Today I saw a hallway, but not in the building. It was between floors. And it knew me." The next day he left for Canada and never returned. Nowadays, this house is not written about in the newspapers, but in city circles it has become an object of silent interest. There are cameras all around it, but no one acknowledges them. Some tenants claim they've been offered discounts if they sign a non-disclosure agreement, a document that clearly states, "Don't describe the nighttime experience on 23rd Street to third parties or members of the press." And yet, every Friday at 2:47, at least one person in this house remains awake to check if the hands are still, if the reflection is moving, and if anything can be heard through the wall. An apartment with a blank wall. In Midtown Manhattan, at the intersection of Lexington Avenue and 57th Street, stands a business-class apartment complex. Glass, security, electronic locks, and $5,000 per month leases. This building, like hundreds of similar ones, uses an automated move-in system. Sign the contract online, receive a code on your phone, and open the door without meeting with a realtor. In 2022, a young woman named Laura moved into apartment 1006. She received payment confirmation, a cleaning schedule, and a personal access code. Everything seemed normal until she tried to enter the apartment. There was no door behind the number plate 1006. There was just a blank wall, painted the same color as the hallway. No hinges, no gaps. Smooth, cold concrete. Laura thought she was on the wrong floor, but everything matched. The card, the electronic lock, the reservation number. When she placed her phone on the reader, she heard the click of the unlocking key, but the wall remained the same. It was as if a door had opened, but to nowhere. The receptionist was surprised but couldn't help. Apartment 1006 was listed as active, paid for, and with a tenant inside. The internal systems showed entry recorded at 1:42 p.m. Laura was standing outside at the time. 2 days later, she received an automated email. "Thank you for moving in. Your service cycle has begun." When she tried to contact the landlord, the phone went unanswered. On the 3rd day, a courier arrived with a delivery addressed to the resident of apartment 1006. The box read, "Thank you for coming back." Laura contacted the police. A patrol arrived and inspected the floor. Nothing special. One of the officers ran the apartment number through the internal database and received the response. The rental property has been deactivated since 1997. But in the management company's CRM system, property 1006 continued to be listed as active. Moreover, rent payments continued to be made monthly from the same bank account for over 10 years. A curious IT specialist from the service company decided to check the system access logs. He found recorded entries into the apartment, but each one occurred at a different time of day, every week, over decades, and always at 3:14 a.m. on Fridays. Sometimes, even on days when the house was completely disconnected from the network due to renovations, he decided to check where the unblocking commands were coming from. The answer surprised him. The sending server had no IP address. Literally, the requests were coming from nowhere. He no longer worked for the company at the end of the month. It was not possible to contact him afterwards. Residents of neighboring apartments reported hearing muffled footsteps through the wall on some nights. Sometimes there was the barely audible creaking of a sofa or the clatter of dishes, as if someone was living there. When an electrician once opened the ventilation panel leading to apartment 1006, he found only concrete behind it. However, on the wall inside the ventilation panel, a chalk line was drawn, a window with a sill and a cup. In 2023, writer and urban enthusiast Jonathan Hayes attempted to investigate the story. He wrote about it on his blog, collected dozens of similar testimonies, and filmed it. A week later, the website was unavailable. All backups were deleted, and social media accounts were blocked at the request of the copyright holder. Only one screenshot remained in the archive, a phrase from the final paragraph of the article. Some apartments don't rent, they choose. At first glance, all these stories may seem like nothing more than urban legends, strange coincidences, paranormal rumors, or figments of the imagination. But time proves one thing again and again: every legend contains a hidden element of truth. Sometimes it's a forgotten detail. Sometimes it's a recurring phenomenon that no one dares to explain. New York is more than just a city. It truly is a living organism, holding within its depths the memory of things we are not yet ready to understand. And those who listen carefully know, some secrets never fade. They simply wait to be heard again.